Welcome to my Ruby Slippers. I'm Lily Strong from the blog Lily Strong. I usually am joined by my favorite middle child, Silly, but as I'm about to explain, Silly is not with me for just today. He will be back next week. If you're here, you probably already know that this podcast is a healing space for all of us who have survived betrayal, abuse, misuse, cruelty, and those really deep emotional earthquakes that have rattled the very foundation of who we are. We talk about the messy stuff here, the hard truths, the inconvenient truths, the healing process that is very tangled, and the power of rewriting our story. Now, I was supposed to be publishing the podcast episode about shame, but this week a lot of unexpected events happened, and I've decided to push shame back for another week. We don't need shame right now, do we? And I'm going to tackle a different subject. And this is one I didn't even expect to record. And it's one of those things that you can't plan. It's because somebody passed away. And it's somebody I didn't expect to grieve even. It's kind of funny because my brother was a musician, and he used to play at funerals. And I remember him telling me he couldn't come to something because he just got a phone call about being able to play at a funeral. I was like, wow, that's like really short notice. And he just looked at me and was like, well, you usually don't plan on having a funeral. And I was like, oh yeah, that's true. It is kind of a last minute thing. Last week, my mother-in-law passed away. And that gets tricky. I divorced her son, so it gets a little bit tricky. Is she still my mother-in-law? Is she my ex-mother-in-law? What are the rules about that? I don't really know. I knew her for over 30 years of my life. She had been a part of my life for the majority, well, basically all of my adulthood. And her passing was not unexpected. She was 96 years old. She lived a long life. And we got along, but she was also a complicated person. And she was the mother of my abuser. So when it comes to the grief that I feel, it's not clean, it's not simple, it's layered with memories and history and guilt and regret. So today I want to talk about what it means to grieve someone who was complicated. Maybe it was someone you lived with, maybe it was someone who hurt you, but it was probably somebody you tried to love anyway. So I've been divorced for almost 4 years now, and truthfully, I hadn't been in touch with my mother-in-law for probably the last 3 years. And that wasn't really my choice. My ex didn't allow it. He would tell her not to call me. He just made it uncomfortable. He maintained control even through our divorce, especially with things like access, family, connections. So once I left him, I pretty much left his whole world. But the truth is, I lived with my mother-in-law for over 20 years. Yes, you heard that right. 20 years I lived with my mother-in-law, and we got along well enough that we did not kill each other. So, hey, that says a lot, right? I raised my children in her home. I cared for her through health scares, through back surgery, breast cancer. I cooked her meals for her. I helped her with her pets and her laundry, and I made her bed, and I took her to doctor's appointments. We had a lot of moments of connection. So I don't want to rewrite history as all bad, because we did have some good moments. But I also know it wasn't super healthy, and I can see that pretty clearly now. And what's strange is that I find myself mourning her in ways that surprise me, because I chose to leave that life. I'm the one who filed for divorce. I am the one that instigated the leaving. It's all because of betrayal and abuse, but I'm the one that left. And yet here I am, I'm crying. I'm remembering things. I'm feeling lost, honestly. And then, of course, I feel guilty for feeling lost because I am a guilt-ridden person. That's just the way I operate. And so it's tricky having to navigate grieving people who weren't safe. There's no map for it. So let me back up a little bit. Like if you talk about normal grieving, there's like the stages of grief. And if I had planned ahead of time, I would have pulled that up so I had that information at my fingertips, which I didn't. So I think there's like 7 steps to grieving. And you know, it's not linear. You bounce around, but you pretty much have to progress through most of them. I think when you're dealing with a person who wasn't a safe person in your life, it changes everything. It turns your world upside down. And so there's no map for navigating through this path. It's just kind of a roller coaster ride. You just gotta hang on tight. Let's go back a little bit. Let me explain how we ended up living with my mother-in-law. So we had moved to Texas temporarily, and I'm doing air quotes over temporarily because it was supposed to be a short stay. Basically, we had been living in California. We were in a house where we were doing a rent-to-own option, and we decided we couldn't afford the house. My husband had lost his job. I had just had my second baby. And apparently he, unbeknownst to me, was facing some possible legal troubles. And I didn't know anything about that. But he just came to me in my, fog of being a young mom and said, I think we need to get out of this house. I think this is draining all of our savings. Why don't we go move to Texas and live with my family for a little bit, just so we can spend some time out there before the kids start school, and you wouldn't have to work, you could stay home, and it would just be nice to spend some time with my family. And I thought, yeah, this sounded good. We wanted to move, and this was just kind of a little adventure. I had basically lived in the same city my entire life, and when we got married, we moved one city away, so I hadn't had a lot of adventures. So as much as I didn't want to leave my family, I was like, this all makes sense. I'm trusting my husband. Let's do it. So this was supposed to be a short stay, but just a few months in, very sadly, my father-in-law had a massive stroke. And he was a fabulous man. Oh, I loved him so much. He was just great. And there were weeks of ups and downs, and in the hospital, in a rehab hospital, and just the craziness that comes along with medical emergencies. Sadly, he didn't make it. He passed away 6 weeks later. But during that time, I did what I always do. I stepped up. I took over the household duties. I made sure my mother-in-law had meals and a clean house and a bed that was made. I made sure her laundry was clean. I just tried to make life as easy as possible. Once the funeral was over, I had a conversation with my husband. I pretty much assumed that once my father-in-law had passed, that they were going to sell this house, because it was this huge, massive Texas house and way too much house for just a one single person to be living in. And so I said, okay, so what are we going to do next? Are we going to sell the house? Is this the time for you and I to go ahead and move back to California now? What do you think we should do? And he said, oh, no, you never make big decisions after a death. You always sit on it and wait. Sounds very reasonable, doesn't it? So he had advised his mom to not sell the house. Just wait. And then he said, and I think we need to stay with her. She wants us with her. We are calming to her. We make her feel safe. And she really enjoys the kids. She needs us. So I said, okay, thinking we're still just going kind of day by day. And just like that, my entire life path changed, and we stayed. Not for weeks, not for months, for 20 years. For 20 years, we lived in a house that was never mine. I was living in someone else's story. It was her furniture that she had picked out. Every closet had her clothes in them. It was her pictures on the wall. It was all completely decorated, completely full. And then our family of 4 at the time, and it would eventually become 5, it was like we were trying to squat, like a squatter in a museum, trying not to disturb the exhibits. We tried so hard not to make an impression on the home, at least not a permanent one. I tried to always decorate for the holidays the way she wanted it done. It was always her Christmas tree with her ornaments the way she wanted it. And we were just kind of tucked away in the cracks and the shadows. This was a really big house. It was a big beige brick 2-story Texas house with a gigantic kitchen and a pool in the backyard. But one of the most unforgettable parts, it was full of dolls. And I hope you don't have any fear of dolls. But this house had literally thousands of dolls in it. It was wall to wall, room to room, shelf to shelf dolls. Cabbage Patch, Little Souls, porcelain babies, Precious Moments, Hummel figures. I mean, any kind of doll that had an ordered number to it or collection involved, she had it. There was one that was about, I'd say 2 feet tall, and it was a fiddler on the roof. It was the only one that bothered my kids. It was in the bedroom where our kids stayed at first. And it was up high up on a dresser. And it was this fully bearded guy with a fiddle. It was weird. Yeah, it was. And so we moved that right away. Took it out of that bedroom. But There were dolls in every single room. It was kind of crazy. And okay, the worst one where there were 4 or maybe 5 life-sized dolls, and they were seated upright in rocking chairs in different rooms. And if you walked in there at night, it looked like there was somebody sitting there in the dark waiting to pounce on you. And they really freaked out the people who came to visit because, yeah, they were weird looking. There were 3 of them were cowboys, and then there was a Native American, and then I think there was another Native American with a baby. So, yeah, I think there were 5 of them. And there was like a canoe, too, that was like life-sized. I mean, it was just like a doll museum. It was crazy. And as Silly and I have discussed before in previous episodes, my mother-in-law was a hoarder. Just because she preferred to hoard nice things doesn't make it different. She's still a hoarder. And she had very strong preferences and even stronger dislikes. And we lived among her things. And I would say it wasn't just her house, it was like a shrine to her preferences. A collection of collections. And I'm sure it sounds like something out of some creepy novel, like a family forced to live in a haunted dollhouse, confined to the attic. It wasn't like that. No, it wasn't. And the Fiddler on the Roof doll was the only doll my kids ever felt scared of. Nobody else had a problem. We were fine. They never came to life and talked to us, I promise. But it was still odd. That's an odd way to live life. We were living in the shadows. My mother-in-law had 4 babies, and she told me once that she had always wanted more. And sadly, she had had a lot of miscarriages. But she had 4 surviving babies. She said that her goal when she was a young mother was she always wanted 8, but she at least had her 4. And then when they grew up, they all got married. And she said then she had her 8 kids and she felt complete. I always liked that story. It showed a real human side to her. But sadly, and I wasn't around during the growing up years, but I did see her with my children as they were growing up. And I gotta say, I think she treated her dolls a little bit more attentively than the real babies. And so this is the home we were living in. We were living in the shadows. Second place 2 dolls. And I was there for 20 years. But when I left suddenly. To recap, I found out about my ex's betrayals and all his lies. Ironically, on the day of our 30th wedding anniversary, which was the end of June. On our wedding anniversary, I find out our entire life together had been a lie. By October 3rd, my youngest son and I got on a plane, left Texas, and never went back. So late June to the beginning of October, we're talking 3.5 months. And in that time, it was utter chaos. We were doing therapy and marriage counseling, giving out ultimatums. More secrets were unraveling faster than I could process them. And I hit my breaking point, and once I knew I had to get out, we left fast. I think it was a total of 2 weeks. I said, we're leaving. I made airline reservations. We packed a couple of suitcases, and that's it. My son and I left, came to California, And we've never been back. Never been back to the house, never even been back to Texas. I left behind almost everything. I left behind my photos, my scrapbooks, my jewelry, my kids' artwork and report cards, the Christmas ornaments they made when they were in preschool. I left behind nearly every memento of the life I had tried to build. And now that my mother-in-law has passed away, that part of my story is closing forever. The house will be sold. Whatever I left behind will be boxed up, given away, or thrown out. I've toyed with the idea of going back. My best friend even offered to come with me just so I wouldn't have to be alone, but the idea of going back, it almost gives me a panic attack just thinking about it. Being back in that environment, being able to smell the smells of the air, seeing the shadows coming in through the kitchen windows. There's just too much. There's too much that it's painful. So I'm thinking right now, my mental health is still too fragile. So I'll probably stay away and I'll grieve not only her death, but also the chance to say goodbye and the chance to say goodbye to what I lost, those last pieces of my old life. There are just layers and layers of complicated, messy life events that just don't fit neatly into a tidy box that we can label grief. I do not want to be disrespectful, but I will say my mother-in-law was a narcissist. And I think it's important to say this out loud. There's a distinction. Not all narcissists are abusers. Okay? There's a very big difference between narcissistic abuse and narcissism. Narcissism is just a self-centeredness, a feeling of superiority that doesn't always lead to abuse. Now, if that narcissism is unchecked, uncontrolled, and it's paired with entitlement, resentment, and a lack of empathy, well, then it crosses that line. But it doesn't have to. So my mother-in-law was narcissistic, no doubt about it. She liked things her way. She thought that was the only way to do things. She would make fun of the way we would eat, and if I ever pointed out that she didn't like things like Parmesan cheese, she would say, well, no, I only eat things that are good. Like, she would kind of just assume smart people don't like Parmesan cheese. Forget about the fact that, it's for sale in every single store. It's everywhere. People eat Parmesan cheese. She liked to control what was deemed appropriate, what was seen as good. She liked to control conversations. She liked to tell people what they should do, what they should say, how they should react, even how they should dress. She used to always tell us, it's cold, go put a jacket on. And if I'd say, oh, I'm fine, this was always her response. She would say, you just don't have the sense to know it's cold. Oh my gosh, that's saying I'm too stupid to know that I'm cold. That's kind of sad. She would say that to my kids too. They don't have sense enough to know that they're cold. And it's hard to feel loved by a person who is saying things like that. But she wanted to control the narrative. She wanted to control the picture to make it look like the world that she wanted it to be. So yes, she was difficult. She could be frustrating, but we got along. I learned how to navigate around her quirks. I figured out the dance, when to step forward, when to back off, how to keep the peace. It wasn't a super healthy relationship, but it was doable. It was survivable. My ex, however, that's a different story. He took it further. He lost all sense of human goodness, I think, because his narcissism wasn't just about control. It was about dominance. It was about humiliation and gaslighting, betrayal, and basically just trying to get away with as much as he possibly could. There was a cruelty to his behavior that his mother never quite reached with me. But I do wonder how much of his cruelty was born in that house, in that home. How much of his behavior was learned by watching her disregard of other people's needs, by absorbing the message that feelings were weaknesses and control was king. I don't know. You know, there's that whole nature versus nurture theory debate that's always going on. I think that his narcissistic tendencies could be genetic, but I think he was given the wrong model as well. So this is where I'm going to get really vulnerable, because I'm stuck and I genuinely don't know what to do. There really is a part of me that wants to go back to that house just one last time, to see it before it's gone, to say goodbye to the life I lived there, maybe grab a few things that still matter to me. But there's another part of me, which is probably the louder, wiser part, that tells me, no, this could be dangerous. Not physically dangerous, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Just being anywhere near my ex-husband could unearth anything I've worked so hard to bury. It could send me spiraling. Just the idea of going back can give me panic attacks. What would happen if I was actually there? And I can't give him that power, never again. So I'm stuck in this place of wondering, what should I do? So what would you do? Would you go back? Would you risk reopening the wound to retrieve a piece of yourself? Or would you just slam the door, let the house and everything in it go? I know there's no right answer. It depends on the person, the situation, what kind of support system's in place. I get it. But I would love to hear your opinion. Not because I need you to make the decision for me, but because sharing this crossroads with others reminds me I'm not alone. And we all end up facing these impossible choices from time to time. So please send me a comment or a message or an email. I would truly love to know, what would you do? Now, this grief isn't just mine. Silly, my brilliant, brave, beautiful middle child, is grieving too. I mean, Silly grew up in that house. It was his grandma's house. And even though he eventually went no contact with her, there was love, and it was real. And there are memories that are real. And now Silly is facing a very complicated loss. Mourning someone they walked away from, someone who had a role in both their childhood joy and in their childhood trauma. When I first told him about his grandmother's passing, I said, okay. And you're going to know that from my last episode when I told my kids that I was being abused. I'm a planner. I like to try to plan things to make things go as smoothly as possible. So when I told Silly, I said, okay, your grandma has passed away. And Silly, in his normal strong style, said, oh, okay, well, we knew that was coming. She was in poor health. I said, yes, I know. But you're going to start feeling a lot of emotions. And I just want to warn you. Feelings are going to just pop up, and it's okay. Embrace it. Feel like crying, cry. You're going to be going through a lot of emotions for the next few days. And so we've been talking a lot about it, this bizarre and foggy grief that we're both going through. And yeah, he is struggling quite a bit. And I'm reminded that sometimes when we lose a person, we're not necessarily mourning the person they were. We can also mourn the potential, the loss of a possibility, the version of that relationship that never materialized. So to anyone who's listening today, if you're grieving someone who hurt you, I want you to know that you are not alone. You are allowed to grieve the loss of someone who wasn't safe. You're allowed to feel whatever you feel. Sad, angry, numb, confused. It's all valid, and you're allowed to mourn what you wished the relationship could have been, not just what it was. I grieve the version of my mother-in-law that I hoped for. I grieve the 20 years I gave trying to make a home in someone else's life. I grieve the silence that she has left behind because it was loud for so long. I grieve the fantasy of family that I held on to. The idea that we could have all loved each other freely, safely, and without manipulation. Manipulation is something I just don't understand. I meet a person and I think, oh, this person's great. Oh, I like their outlook on life. I like their sense of humor. I like their intellect. I look for the positives. I look for how, when we're together, both of our sparks can be ignited. I never meet a person and think, what can I get from this person? And then think several chess moves ahead to get what I want. And that's what I feel like this other family was. My mother-in-law, my husband, they were controlling and manipulative. And I just have to accept that I will never understand that outlook. So when it comes to grief, grief doesn't always look like bouquets of flowers and saran-wrapped casserole dishes. Sometimes it's just a very quiet ache, a phantom feeling, a whisper of what never was. If that's where you are today, I see you. And I want to invite you to join us on this yellow brick road of healing. And remember the power that Dorothy discovered she had in her ruby slippers. I also want to invite you to check out the Lilly Strong blog. The article that's being highlighted this week is called, Is Narcissistic Coercive Control a Mystery to You? If you've ever felt controlled but couldn't quite explain how or why, you just know you kept shrinking in someone else's presence, okay, this one's for you. It's the anchor article in a series called Coercive Control. And it breaks down the subtle, sneaky tactics that narcissists use to dominate without raising a hand. And I want to remind you to not forget about on Wednesdays we wear Ruby. That's our midweek burst of empowerment. Check it out on the Lilly Strong blog or on our Instagram page. It's just kind of your weekly reminder that you're not alone and that you're stronger than you know. Because healing is a journey, and we're walking it together, friends, one ruby step at a time. Thanks for joining me on my Ruby Slippers. If this episode spoke to you, please share it with somebody who needs to hear it. And if you're feeling that quiet ache today, I want you to do something about it. Write about it. Talk about it. Simply hold space for it. You need to lean into it. So until next time, take care of your heart, my friends. And remember, you don't have to grieve like anyone else, even when it's for somebody who is complicated or difficult, even for somebody who might not have been safe. You get to grieve the way that is raw, authentic, and honest for you.